Yeah, so we help tenants provide their information when they're looking to lease a space in a much faster and compliant way. And then we help landlords decision it in a much more clean and I consider to be actionable fashion. And that's what we do. You just boil it down. We're just trying to help the deal move faster through the pipeline. There's a lot of money in real estate spent on prospecting and marketing. There's not a ton of money spent on greasing the wheels once they're at a signed LOI. We're the solution that takes them from prospect to profit.
Welcome back to the AI Edge podcast, where we talk with founders, operators, and investors who use systems, technology, and sharp execution to drive real results in the real world. Today's guest is right in that intersection of commercial real estate and practical AI. Josh Feinberg is the CEO and co-founder of Otso, a AI-powered underwriting as a service platform that helps institutional owners and leasing teams execute better tenant financial due diligence, close leases faster, and create millions in new asset value. Before Otso, Josh spent more than a decade as a commercial broker, owner, and investor with over $1 billion in transactions under his belt. He's lived the pain of traditional tenant screening, scrutinizing, and risk management, and now he's building the platform he wishes he had as an owner. We're going to talk about leasing operations for retail, office, and industrial assets, how underwriting is changing, and where AI actually belongs in that stack. Josh, welcome to the show.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me.
Great to have you here, Josh. So as we start off, I'd love to start off with your path. You know, when someone asks you in real life, what do you do and how do you do it? What do you normally answer?
Yeah, so now I'm a prop tech executive, but I spent a long time as a commercial broker. I got into the industry when I was 21, and I got into the industry like a lot of folks do on the leasing side. I literally called signs where I lived. I called the guy who had the most signs in the area and said, I'm looking for a job. And he said, cool, you can work for free, as many folks do in the beginning. Commission only. I spent 6 months trying to figure things out, and I had some really great mentors. 10 years later, I was doing investment sales, acquisitions, and running essentially our fund, transitioned from brokerage into ownership. At the time, I was the young guy, so they said, okay, you handle a lot of this. As many small to mid-sized commercial firms do, they have investment partners. Through that really came the genesis of Otso. Otso was founded for really, one simple reason. I think it's far too difficult for not only mid-sized landlords, but mostly institutional landlords to gather, collect, and then safely diligence commercial tenant prospects in a compliant way. It takes too long. It costs a lot of time and effort, which we all know time kills deals. And the challenge for most institutional owners at scale is they're doing hundreds, if not thousands of these annually across new deals, renewals, and assignments, which we've seen a ton of this year.
Incredible. So you were a broker, owner, and investor for years before jumping into building tech. Where were the key experiences or your frustrations that push you from doing deals into building a platform like Otso?
Yeah, so the transition was interesting. I think going from brokerage, which was much more transactional based, to having to sort of wear the hat of being an owner and making decisions on the leasing or sort of we're going to do this deal or not was really a big transition. Obviously, brokers, I think, absolutely care about who they're leasing to, but they're not taking that really, financial risk of if this tenant defaults. Most properties across that we owned were sort of, small to mid-size industrial, small MOBs, so medical office buildings, and little retail centers, right? Sort of 10 to 30,000 square feet. And a good 70 or 80% of those are non-anchored tenants. And so it's not your Chipotle's, it's not your Best Buys, or your Exxons. If you're here from Houston, it's totally different. So for us, it was our challenge to figure out, how are we going to transition our properties into what I consider to be a more institutional level of diligence? I think a lot of things are done on the back of a napkin or with an old spreadsheet. But when you have 150 or 200 tenants, that doesn't really work. And the challenge for us was, like a lot of landlords, we'd see 7, 10, 12, 15 defaults a year. And there's really nothing worse. If every building is its own partnership, if every building is its own business, then if you lose part of that rental income stream, you're in real trouble. I think we talked a little bit earlier, but the challenge for most owners is that properties are valued really on 3 foundational tiers: term, rent, and credit. Most landlords have got term and rent nailed. They're very good at saying, this is where I want to be, this is how much rent I need to be profitable, and this is how long a lease I want to sign. right? So you're weighing your concessions and your deal costs. The challenge is credit. Again, everybody wants to transact with Starbucks. Everybody wants to transact with Chipotle or McDonald's, et cetera, but that's not the bulk of commercial real estate. The bulk of commercial real estate is your necessity-based convenience local centers. That's your nail salons, your bakeries, your restaurants, your urgent cares, what have you. It's the stuff people use every single day. We drive by 1,000 times a week. And it's the stuff we shop and live and generally enjoy. So for us, it was, how do I, at scale, make better decisions? And two things were immediately apparent. Even if we had third-party leasing, the collection of the information was really a challenge. For a lot of reasons, small business owners, maybe they're not as organized as, a Chipotle or something like that. And really it's, they're using a lot of new entities. So it's a hybrid mix from a credit perspective of personal guarantees, especially in retail, and if they have any, corporate credit, right? Like a lot of retail landlords struggle with, what entity am I actually getting? Oftentimes with a restaurant, you're not getting the holding company. You're getting, San Diego Restaurant 2 LLC, whatever it may be. And it has no history. And so there's really nothing for you if, God forbid, if something goes wrong. And look, small business default rates are what they are. They're well north of 50%. So you're taking the risk as a landlord, mostly in deal costs, right? Your TI and your commissions. And as we all know, if a tenant vacates, there's time loss, there's vacancy loss, and you're out whatever you spent to put them in. Again, nothing worse for an owner than a tenant going dark without notice. If that happens consistently, you've got a big problem for your investors. And more importantly, most real assets are leveraged. So you've got a problem for your debt partners too. And so Otso really seeks to save that problem by collecting that information very similarly to what I consider to be a modern experience would be for, applying for a car loan or applying for a mortgage or applying for a apartment. It's online. It's 5 to 7 minutes. It connects to their bank account if they choose. It allows them to upload the information cleanly, verify their identity with 2FA. And most importantly, it's done in a very compliant manner. Our clients are compliant. They're SOC 2, which if you're not familiar with is the gold standard for CPAs, making sure that your information security is auditable and safe. You're collecting PII, which is the scariest information for a landlord to have to manage. And at scale, let's say you're doing 500 of these a year, you might be collecting 1,000 tax returns, all with social securities. You might be collecting 3,000 bank statements, 5,000 bank statements, 10,000 pages of financial statements. All of that is as secure and important information as you need to progress. And with the cost of a hack now exceeding $10.2 million, most of our institutional landlords and CTOs join us for a combination of information security, so compliance, and then that modern experience I described for collecting. From a decision-making perspective, the hard part with hybrid credit is most tenants are really good at saying, here's the money I use to start up my business. And here's 50 grand in an account. Here's 100 grand in an account. What you don't see is that historical liquidity, which most landlords, that's really what matters, is how much money do they have essentially every day of the week for the past 2 years. That's what Otso tries to provide. Through our connections to, 15,000 banking partners, our institutional landlords on every deal understand this is how much money this prospect has personally. Here's how much money their business has. And this is auditable, verifiable information. It's not a personal financial statement somebody can just fill out in a spreadsheet. God forbid, we saw a lot of those when we first started. You get an auditable trail. So, that's V1, right? Like that's setting a baseline across your hundreds of deals per year. 2, which I'm super excited about, is when you go from, all right, now I have a baseline, let's say on 20% of my portfolio. Well, next year I've got 40%. And we allow landlords to connect to an ongoing feed of that financial information. And so imagine for them being able to say, hey, when this tenant signed a lease, now they have, they had 100 grand in an account on an average basis. Now they have 500. Business is going great. Why don't we reach out to them to expand? Or the flip side of that, they signed a lease with 500 grand and now they're down to 2. Big yellow flag, cash flow problems. Again, landlords are almost always the last to know when a default happens. And I was really proud of a study that one of our biggest clients, Perform Properties, did with us this year. And we showed that they had a very traditional default rate of, 5-6% across their entirety of their portfolio, which is roughly, 40 million, 50 million square feet. With us, it's down below 1%. And so actionable, proven results. And I know we'll get into some of the AI stuff, but that's exactly what we built Otso for. AI helps us. I'm happy to sort of dive into how we do that and make it work for our clients at scale. But that's really the goal, is I want our clients to be able to collect information safely, much faster, make better decisions, and ultimately have better property performance over the term of the leases.
That's amazing, Josh. So tell us a little bit about what was this specific moment or deal where you realize the way that we're underwriting and securing leases is broken.
Yes, that's a great question. So for us, it was an amalgamation. It was a combination. It wasn't one deal. It was multiple deals, right? So for us, we experienced those 7 or 10 defaults a year across a portfolio of 150 tenants. And what was happening was it was skewed towards retail. And I think it was a challenging environment. It was sort of, right around COVID. And so you had a lot of challenge. Frankly, mom and pops paid their rent better than some of the institutionals did and the nationals did during that time. But we had some folks struggling, and they said, look, we had to at scale now assess, not 25 deals a year, 100, because we had all these tenants going, oh my gosh, this is really different for us. And so Otso really came along and said, all right, look, I've got to be able to get this information in faster. And I think for tenants, they don't want to email this information necessarily, right? This is tax returns and bank statements, like I said, pictures of their driver's license, all that stuff. They don't want to have to email that. And that was really sort of what they were being asked to do at scale. I was surprised when I talked to counterparts in the industry that this wasn't a problem just for folks our size. It was the folks who are problem, 10 times our size, 100 times our size, up to your Perform and your Phillips Edisons of the world. They were saying, look, we're inundated with this information. And again, there's no rocket science to a lot of this. We want tenants in our buildings that are going to be successful and pay rent, right? That's how our buildings, essentially, we're underwriting income streams over a long period of time. And so if, again, you get up to the Blackstone level, they're going, cool, how do I dive into the credit across 1,000 tenants or 3,000 tenants? And then you've got your folks that own maybe 5 buildings and they have 100 tenants, and they may go, okay, cool, this still helps me. That's the goal, is you want to be able to properly assess and value your assets at scale. And if you don't have that third leg figured out, the credit leg, you're really not getting full value for your assets.
Amazing. So you talk a lot about the way commercial leases are underwritten and scrutinized being out of balance. If we strip away the jargon, what's actually broken about how most owners and asset managers handle tenant screening and leases today?
Yeah. So the first leg we've talked about is collection. It's hard. It's slow. Most of our clients before Otso, it takes them somewhere between 2 and 3 weeks just to collect the information. And then, if you're an institutional, it's going to a different team. It's the asset management team. The asset management folks are trying to look at 30 or 40 of these a month. And they're going, okay, I have to search through 15 bank statements, 2 tax returns, a personal financial statement. You're trying to verify what the prospect has filled out and cross-reference it across multiple documents. It's a ton of documentary work. Humans make mistakes. And oftentimes, the most frustrating thing for both the tenant and the landlord, I think, is if leasing is responsible for collecting it, they may collect what the tenant just has. They'll say, hey, here's a checklist, send me what you got. And they're just, again, emailing it, forwarding over to asset management, dropping it in a Dropbox, whatever it may be, and it goes into a queue. Well, what if it takes another week just to get to that deal in the queue? And then they get to it and go, well, there's not enough information here. I got to go back and, now we got to go back to leasing, and the leasing's got to go back to the tenant. Again, you can feel the frustration. It's taken them 4 to 6 weeks without us to get to a decision. And then they don't even have all the information, really, like I described, to make a good decision. I think in their heart of hearts, if you ask these asset managers, you want to know what their personal liquidity profile looks like. Credit and background are super important. I think most landlords do a good job of saying, here's their credit score if they're looking at them for personal guarantee, which is extremely common in retail. The background, they're looking for, obviously felonies or watch lists and stuff like that. But most importantly, it's, do they have money consistently to pay rent if the business has an issue? And I think your biggest risk as a landlord is if you say, let's go ahead and do this deal, and you write a $50,000 check for TI, you write a $20,000 check for commissions, is how quickly do I break even on that $70K? And so Otso allows you to go, all right, you're going to break even in 7 months on this $70K. Are they going to make it 7 months? And if they're not going to make it 7 months, how easy is it for me? How have I reduced and mitigated my risk? Right? That's security deposit, that's personal guarantee. You can feel the variables that they're trying to weigh on a single deal. Now scale that to 30 a month. That's a big pain point. Again, there's not hundreds of these employees within a company. These are generally small teams. Like even a group like Link Logistics, huge company, Blackstone backed, might have 4, 6, 8 if they're lucky in a region. And so we look at ourselves as an extension of that lease operations team. We take the collection off their hands. We take the diligence assessment. We produce them a report. And again, they always get the underlying link so they can dive as deep as they want. But mostly we're able to synthesize those 50 plus documents, those 2 years of history from daily liquidity and go, cool, like here's your 5 sort of quadrants, or 5 sort of, quintiles. Here's where they land. And then you as a landlord can go, all right, like I need more information or I don't. I can move forward or I can't, and allow the tenants to either explain. Again, it's the idea is getting actionable information faster. Most of our clients post Otso are making decisions in 4 days versus 6 weeks. And so it's significantly faster.
Huge.
Again, not to mention, safer and more compliant, but those things are important too.
Amazing. So in your opinion, Josh, who feels the most pain right now? Is it the leasing teams, the asset managers, the tenants, or the investors?
So I think it's the asset. Again, I think everybody shares pain, but I think it's the asset managers most and first and foremost, because if they're not using something like us, again, they're the ones who are having to dig through this mountain of documentation. So whether it's a leasing admin person or an analyst, it's a lot of information to sort through. And it's their kind of name on the line if this tenant doesn't do well. And I think they're feeling that. Investors, I think at scale aren't feeling this problem directly, right? Like they're looking at property performance or fund performance as a whole. They're feeling it if the decisions are bad. They're feeling it if there's a lot of defaults or there's problems. Again, that can happen. But if, retail's generally, if it's 90% leased, they're not super concerned if there's 1 default or 2 defaults across an entire region. So we don't get a lot of heat from investors. Lenders, on the other hand, I think are far more concerned if they're looking to refinance a property or they're looking to, again, if they own theoretically 70% of it when it's bought, right? Like you're putting 30-70 is a very common sort of equity debt split. And then leasing, I think they're feeling the heat from the tenant, which is, I sent you this information. You told me we're going to make a deal. What's going on? In leasing, their entire quota is let's get deals done. What asset management's job is to say, let's get the right deals done. So they're not in competition with each other. They don't have competing interests, but they have different layers of diligence that need to be acquired. But I would say on the AM side and the operations side, that's where the pain is felt most.
Excellent. So Josh, for someone listening for the first time or hearing about Otso for the very first time, how do you explain what you do in plain English?
Yeah, so we help tenants provide their information when they're looking to lease a space in a much faster and compliant way. And then we help landlords decision it in a much more clean and I consider to be actionable fashion. And that's what we do. Ultimately, we just boil it down. We're just trying to help the deal move faster through the pipeline. There's a lot of money in real estate spent on prospecting and marketing. There's not a ton of money spent on greasing the wheels once they're at a signed LOI. We're the solution that takes them from prospect to profit.
Amazing. Walk me through what happens when a leasing team runs a prospect through Otso and what changes versus the old way of doing it.
Yeah. So in the old way, let's say a tenant has gotten to the point of signing a letter of intent. An institutional asset team will go, great, now collect me all their financials. Again, that process will take a couple of weeks typically to go back and forth and make sure they've collected enough. If they even have a standardized process, and that tenant will email it over. The leasing team will email it or forward it over to the asset management team, and then it goes into a queue wherein they're sort of trying to parse through it and make information. Without so, typically a request is made using our online secure platform. It takes the landlord roughly a couple of minutes. They're putting in their contact information, their deal economics, they're putting in their LOIs, and they're sharing the access with the folks they want to share it with. That takes 2-3 minutes. The tenant gets what we call a magic link. And so they get a little link that says, landlord X has requested your information for lease Y at 123 Main Street. So, leasing has already let them know that this is coming, right? Like this is part of the process. This is what to expect. So you can click here to start the process. They log in, they verify their identity. They have the option to connect their bank accounts. They have the option to connect business bank accounts. They have the option to, we use a system called Plaid for that. Plaid is owned by Visa. They're the institutional juice across the banking system for connections via API. SOC 2, secure, fast. If you've ever signed up for Venmo and connected a bank account, it's the same exact experience on our platform. And we do the same thing for verification of identity. They're able to upload a picture of themselves and their ID all within their phone. The last thing they can do is upload things. So they can upload their tax returns. They can upload, a business plan if they've got some really cool things that they're going to be doing differently, things that help them sort of make their case to the landlord. We take the approach that our job is to help the tenant look as complete as possible to the landlord. Again, we can't change the facts on the ground, right? Like their financials are what they are, but operational experience, if they've got a special situation where somebody's giving them money, all of that we try to synthesize in a matter of minutes. So it takes the tenant typically 7 to 10 minutes to go through that entire process. Our team typically returns that within 24 hours.
Amazing.
And so we've had deals go as fast as landlord, make the request at 11, tenant fill it out by 12, report by 2. That's as fast as it gets. I think the common is about 100 hours from the day the landlord makes the request to the tenant sort of sitting down, taking the time, doing it. They may wait till the weekend because they've got a full-time job at their business, and then fill it out and kind of go from there. And then for the landlord, they get a fully synthesized report like we described. It's typically 5 to 9 pages long, depending on the level of information and whether it's a corporate entity with a lot of mature history or it's a personal guarantee deal, which for retail, 95% of the deals we do are with a personal guarantee. They're looking at that hybrid. For our clients like Rudin or Nuveen, they're looking at an office deal, right? So it's much more mature entities that have been around for 5, 7, 10 years. We're not looking at personal financials in those deals. We're looking at corporate financials, P&Ls, things of that nature, balance sheets, etc. And then from there, we thank the tenant for their time and we let the landlord go make their deal. We always allow the landlord to revise the report once for free. So if the landlord says, hey, the tenant now says they've got an extra $100K in an account, can you go collect it? We'll do that. That way, again, our job is to help the landlord get the deal done and help the tenant get through that process just as quickly and sort of, again, it's not fun to apply for things. It's not, if you've ever done it, if you applied for a mortgage, like it doesn't feel great when people are looking at your financials and pulling your credit, but it's our job to sort of get through that process as cleanly, as quickly as possible.
Love it. So are you in just retail? Different asset classes?
No, so we cover all 3 asset classes. Our biggest clients are, the Blackstones of Perform Properties. We work with Nuveen on a lot of their office assets nationally. Rooted Management out of New York, we do a lot of deals with them. Phillips Edison on the retail side. Those are probably our biggest folks. We just signed up Acadia, Conam out of the West Coast. So we do things nationally. We've done deals for Kimco and others. But what we try to do is, the power of Otso is scale. Is if you're not doing this in a unified, standardized way, and I'm talking from collection to assessment to lease signing, you're leaving money on the table and it's making your processes slower. Again, the difference between getting a lease done in a week versus 6 or 8 is a massive amount of NOI. And so that's really what it's about. It's about letting these people transact in a faster fashion.
Amazing. Let's talk a little bit about AI. AI is attached to everything that we're doing right now, Josh. But in your world, it's attached to something very specific, underwriting and risk. So from your vantage point, where does AI actually change the game in leasing operations? And where do humans still have the lead to judgment?
Yeah. So first and foremost, I think the best uses of AI are when they're a tool for a human. I don't look at them as direct replacements for humans. Maybe we'll get there in 20 years, but that's not for me. That's a different podcast. I think for us, we look at them, if they're used correctly, as an amplification. I think the challenge for customers that are our size, like your Blackstones and your Performs and your Phillips Edisons, are across hundreds of employees, how AI is used across these organizations. And I think if you look at how IT is trying to manage that and CIO, CTO is trying to manage that, whether it's Microsoft or it's Copilot, does it work with our existing systems? Then I think you've got your leasing folks on the ground who are sort of saying, I don't want to wait. I want to start using this stuff. And I think you've got a real dichotomy between what IT wants and what some of these folks are doing, whether it's for marketing and prospecting. What I tell people every day is you should not be putting PII or financials through insecure systems. I think it's unfortunately probably happening. I think if you, in your heart of hearts, I think if brokers are probably putting in some leases into a chat GPT, they shouldn't be doing that, even though it's SOC 2. That's proprietary information. It's confidential information. So I think there's a lot of scrambling going on at the organizational level of, look, this is here now. We have to figure out a way to use it. But we also have to make sure we're doing it in a compliant, sort of secure way. That's not just about Otso and what we do, where compliance is sort of built into our DNA. It's really for them, it's scale, right? Like it's not only like tenant information, it's leases, which that is your proprietary data. there's almost nothing important from a data perspective at the landlord level than those actual lease documents. The challenge for them is, they're out acquiring, they're selling, there's leases, there's different third party folks, there's property managers. They haven't really figured out a way to unify it. And again, as you bring things in, are the people on the ground doing things that may not necessarily align with what the enterprise folks are?
Makes sense. Yeah. So, where is or what is one AI use case in commercial real estate leasing that you think is underrated or misunderstood right now?
Yeah, so I'll give sort of my spiel, the way we use it, first and foremost. I think the way we use it is we're a fan of agentic workflows. And so we don't use ChatGPT. We use API-driven systems that are SOC 2 compliant, do not train, do not cache, using systems like OpenRouter and Llama. That's what we're concerned about. And so we're designing, and I think the biggest success that we've seen is designing single agent specific task flows. Like, for example, this agent, this is your job, this is your role, and all you do is this. For example, for us, it might mean something like, read this information we're sending you and only read this information, return to us a specific JSON object that extracts these 5 things and only do that. I think the challenge for a lot of folks with AI is ChatGPT is kind of what they know. They're used to, whether it's on their phone or their computer, they're used to sort of chatting with it, whether for their personal use or whether it's, making a business plan or marketing or something like that. That's not going to align with secure workflows at a corporate level. Now, what I think probably the most interesting use case that I've seen over the past couple of months is we're starting to see agents live inside of systems like Microsoft Excel, where it used to take, and this isn't what we do every day, but where it used to take weeks for an institutional investment analyst to draft an underwriting model for a building. AI can build that in minutes. You can give it your specific formula, your specific criteria, and it will actually now build you a model in Excel, not just, hey, this is within ChatGPT and here's a spreadsheet. I'm talking it's in the program, it's in Excel. So I think the most exciting thing that we'll see in 2026 is the programs that we use every day, whether it's Microsoft Word or it's Microsoft Excel, they'll be extremely powerful when you add in a specific agent. The other place, and this is less CRE specific, is in software development. So when I first got into prop tech, it was very similar. I was coming from the real estate world. It was, okay, I don't know anything about software, so I got to go hire a dev team, and you got to hire a project manager. You're wholly dependent upon how good they are and who recommended them, and hopefully it's a good recommendation. And you're going to spend 6, maybe 7 figures building out whatever project and platform you want. And the coders, the software developers, it might take them a week or 2 weeks or 4 weeks, to call them sprints, to draft out your new feature. Or, even when you have a successful platform and, you're already going. That's no longer the case. These developers now have access to AI coding assistants like Anthropic's Claude Code. Even ChatGPT's got a coding assistant called Codex. OpenRouter uses systems like Klein, where if you've ever been, within VS Code or Xcode, you'll have a panel now on the left that is an AI. And you can tell it, hey, I need to upgrade this feature. These are the 6 things that I would like to happen. Draft me a plan to do that. And then you, as sort of a product manager, a project manager, can go, okay, if I was going to give this to a developer, this is exactly what I would do. I would give it a blueprint. And software to me is a lot like building a building. It's going to work the way that your blueprint describes it. And so if you don't spend a lot of time on that blueprint, you're not going to have a very successful outcome. And I think if you ask an institutional landlord, hey, we spent $250,000 building out this, quote unquote platform, and now we can't even use it. Nobody likes it. It doesn't work. It's got all these problems. Again, they're not software companies, so they're spending time with third parties, and it's very expensive both to build and continually maintain and manage. Now you can amplify it with one developer and maybe a project manager, and it's like that developer has 5 assistants within their back pocket. What used to take 2 weeks might take 2 days. Building an MVP can be done now in a week, where it might take 6 weeks before. It's fascinating to see. Now, it's not perfect. You still need experience in software development. It does not replace a software developer. But when you hire a developer that understands how to use these tools, it's like hiring 4. And that is an incredible increase in productivity at scale.
That's absolutely amazing. I love what you're doing with AI and how you're making using it as a tool. And I completely agree with you. Use it as a tool. We're not here to replace humans, but use it as a tool. And the person that understands how to use AI the best by prompting it is going to be somebody who will be valuable in the future.
Well, I agree. Like, prompting is a skill now, and it's interesting too because I think you have to have an understanding of the strengths of individual models. Like we have found a lot of success with the Gemini models, so from Google, your 2.5 and your 3s, specifically as it relates to agentic workflows. Again, that single agent do this. Orchestration workflows I don't think are there yet. I think a lot of people really want this idea of, hey, I'm going to like make a marketing team with AI and there's an AI agent that's going to orchestrate all this. Again, I think it's garbage in, garbage out. It can be done, but it's not as effective as giving guardrails and constraints. Again, large language models, whether they're open source or closed source, operate much better with constraints and guardrails. If you let them do whatever, they're going to hallucinate. They're going to make things up, especially, and I tell this to folks all the time, when you're looking at documents. And these brokers will tell me, oh, I uploaded a whole lease and it gave me these 10 things out of it. And I said, did you check the 10 things? Well, no, I just believed it. That's not good. Because these systems at scale, you're sharing resources, right? Like context windows, and they use what's called a middle out transformation, which sounds exactly what it is. They're cutting the middle out. It's scanning the document as fast as it can, and maybe it can't even parse it. And again, these models are built to please you, especially ChatGPT. And I tell folks all the time, double check your work. Do not rely on it 100%. They do hallucinate. They're not perfect. So for us, every report that we pump out, 100% of them touches a human before it goes to a customer. It has to.
Super important. I see errors all the time in our AI systems. It will redo things. It will continue to reiterate over and over and over, or weave out things. You can have a prompt and it's super, super long, and you'll ask it to rewrite that prompt and it will miss things that we worked on and it was very, very important in that prompt. So
yeah, you're running out of resources. And again, you can pay more for more resources, right? You can pay $2,000 a month for ChatGPT and you'll get more resources. It'll do less of that middle out transportation, but you don't have your own server. And again, it would cost a fortune to run a model that big. You couldn't do it. And again, that's why they're losing $11 billion a quarter, or whatever it is, because there's server farms dedicated to being able to produce these tasks for you. That's why I love the concept of very small models, open source or closed source systems, do not train, do not cache, saying just do this. I think the more tasks you give it, the more broadness and vagary and generalization, the worse you're going to see. And again, it's consistency. I, as a business, and I think most of my clients would agree, I'll pay more for reliability, I'll pay more for stability, and I'll pay more for consistency. Integrations are no longer a problem. It should not take weeks to months to integrate with some system. And if it is, find a different system or a different vendor. That should not be an excuse anymore. That should not take anyone weeks. AI is really good at going, okay, cool. This is how your API looks, and this is how my API looks. Let's find a way to connect. That's a great use of AI. It's really good at stuff like that. It's less good at, let me come up with a specific lease abstraction from a 200-page lease.
Yeah, it's not
much less good.
Yeah, much less good. Most of your clients are serious institutional groups. So when an institutional owner or a REIT decides to change the way they do tenant underwriting, what has to be true for their decision to really stick?
So what we ask them to do is adopt us. We do trials. So we tell them to adopt us for 90 days, run us in parallel. I don't think it behooves anyone to transition their entire process overnight. I think especially a process that touches multiple teams like tenant underwriting, because leasing is going to do it one way. Maybe the assignment team does it another within leasing admin. Maybe that's property managers, and asset managers may say, hey, these are more high priority than lower priority. Again, you're touching a lot of different folks. And so within a trial, we don't charge for seats. We say, look, put as many people on as you possibly need to. We'll get them the roles they need within the platform. Some of them aren't making requests, right? That's more of an admin thing. They're reviewers, right? They're the asset manager. Maybe the leasing person is making the request and they want insight into the process and how long it's taking, and did the tenant provide everything that we asked them to. Those are the types of oversight that keeps your deals running. Is that information pushed into Salesforce? So like that's not something we would do in a trial, but most of these retailers are using, Salesforce at scale, right? Like that's their CRM of record in a lot of places. A lot of them are using MRI at scale on the property management side. So do they want to push the information there? Those are the types of things that we're trying to assess early on. But you can see like the first 90 days is about learning What parts of your process are not working? Well, we've already described, like, we know it's not working, but we want them to see it and feel it. And so we'll have them, run 5, 10, 30 deals a month with us and go, okay, cool. Like, these were a lot faster. We made a lot faster decisions. And the tenants were a lot happier. The number one thing for us is, we do customer service, CSAT. We're going to tell them, look, this is what the tenant said. Like, this is the result of the process. We asked them how it was. We want those satisfaction ratings to be high. We want them to, I love it when a tenant says, this was smooth, this was efficient, this was way faster than the last lease I signed. Those are the types of things that are important to me, because I know the most valuable resource these landlords have are their tenants and their prospective tenants. So we treat them like they would.
Amazing. So how do you see the best organizations rolling out a platform like Oso, so it doesn't just become another tool that no one else uses?
Yeah. So first and foremost, like, we try to identify the folks on the ground that are doing the work. And so our most successful implementers are a combination of leasing admin folks, asset managers, and generally not leasing brokers, because leasing brokers are doing a totally different job. They shouldn't be responsible, in my opinion, for collecting financials. That's not their primary job. Some of them have to do it because there's no one else doing it, but it's not their job primarily. And I don't think they want to do it if you ask them in their heart of hearts. They want to go make deals. They want to prospect. They want to get folks into the pipeline. That middle of the pipeline is typically back office folks, right? It's your director of operations. It might be a property manager. It's almost certainly a lease administrator. And there's always the asset management team. Those are the folks that we tell them, look, up front, this is your users. Okay, if you want leasing involved, that's totally fine. Your setup is your setup. We're happy to have them. We'll train them. Again, there's no training here. If they can fill out a form, they can fill out our request. But that being said, we're going to get them in online in 15 minutes. Like, I don't think brokers want to learn new technology generally. I don't think they have time to learn a very difficult, huge platform. So that's not how we're built. We're built, it's web-based, it's fast, there's no app to download. I want them to get in there, make their request, and then we ping them when the information's ready. That's how I want them to feel. Okay, like, they have a bunch of stuff going on. I don't want them to have to be like, well, where's this tenant in the prospect? So, okay, it's been a week and they've gotten their second reminder. Now they just filled it out, right? Like, they always have insight into that process, or they can push it into Salesforce. It says reports ready. Cool. They click it. Asset management's notified, property management's notified, leasing is notified, and they know, cool, you're in the next part of the pipeline, right? Then again, you can see it visually in your mind when the tenant goes, hey, I saw a space, to hey, I signed an LOI, to hey, I'm in financial diligence, to hey, I'm approved. And then the last part of the process, which we're not involved in, is somebody on their side is drafting a lease. But I want to get them to that point just as quickly as possible. Again, I don't know about software for lawyers, but I'm sure they're using AI at scale too to make their lives easier.
Amazing. I know from my own experience and my own investing experience that having those financials, having those due diligence and everything that we needed when we offered the OM to certain people, we had them sign a form or a disclosure, a non-disclosure, an NDA, before we would ever release that information, because that information was so incredibly secure or sensitive, right?
It is. It's the most sensitive information for a person that there is.
Yeah. So we're talking about data, trust, and security. When you're dealing with financials, identity, sensitive information, what does it take to earn trust from the asset managers, legal ITs, and tenants when you're touching that kind of data?
Well, to me, the minimum standard is SOC 2. You need to be compliant, audited by a third party that says your systems are safe and your processes. SOC 2 is not just about your using compliant platforms. It's about, do your employees understand these processes at scale? Right? Because you have a lot of movement within these organizations. If you have 1,000 employees, you're going to have leasing folks leave, get promoted, email address is changing, email inbox is changing. Where does that information go? Is it just stuck? Again, a lot of these financials are living in Outlook, and email is 95% of hacks come via email. It is 100% the worst way to collect sensitive information. And if you're an institutional landlord and you're doing that, you are just living on the razor's edge. It is going to happen to you. You're going to get smoked. Whether you've seen it to Target and Walmart, real estate is a massive target for hackers. And by the way, their lives are getting much easier because AI is allowing them to spoof things at a much better, easier, and frankly, harder to predict and resist. These things look real. So like, whether it's Try Riot or it's some level of cybersecurity training, we see our clients, their employees are training consistently. Again, we're part of that process for them. We're one of their tools to make sure that they're using compliant processes, and we take some of that risk off their bucket too, because we're doing the collecting. But for the ones that aren't, if you're not doing that, I really encourage you to, take a hard look in 2026 at making sure that you're not collecting this stuff via email. And don't think that Dropbox is 100% safe either. Managing file permissions, SharePoint just had a massive hack. They are not that safe. The number one way to do it is to silo it in cold storage for long-term safety. Our best clients are taking that financial information that we provide, and again, after 45 days, it's deleted on our platform, and we're sending it to their cold storage system. And the cold storage, that means it's not hot. That means nobody can grab a document and pull it in 5 minutes. It takes 48 hours for them to pull that document. That's a lot of time for IT to make sure the person who made this access has the right to do it. Again, God forbid, in a default situation 4 years down the road, that's when you're using that cold storage silo.
Amazing. Let's put yourself in a owner's shoes for a second. What questions should they be asking vendors like you when it comes to data security and AI?
Well, one, how do you use AI? Which models are you using? Are those models compliant? Are you training somebody else's AI on my data? And is that secure? Again, I've mentioned that the two terms I use at scale are do not train, do not cache. That means anything that we send to an AI doesn't keep it. We get an answer and it's gone. That is extremely important. If you send it to ChatGPT, you'll see they've kept your project for quite some time. And we don't even know where it's living once you delete the project. Again, they are SOC 2 compliant, but that doesn't mean you should be having somebody's personal financial information in there for weeks. And I assure you, there are folks on the ground in this country that are doing that at scale, that are just saying, hey, here's 10 bank statements, look at them. That's no bueno. We don't do that. You shouldn't be doing that. That's number one. Number two, again, email. Get these things out of your email boxes. And it's not just managing the cybersecurity when somebody leaves. It's they've done this for 10 years this way or 20 years this way. They tell the tenant, hey, send me a zip file with these 2 tax returns. Here's a financial statement. Fill this out, this spreadsheet, this Excel doc. Well, it's got their social security in it and their driver's license in it. What are you doing with that file? Where is it living? Is it living in Outlook? Not good. And again, they're really good at sort of saying, like, here's a phishing attack and here's how to resist it. We're going to put in Mimecast, and we're going to make sure we're not getting, viruses and things of that nature. The same level of, that's not the most common way you're going to get hacked. Again, it does happen. Like, you're going to get a phishing attack is the most common, though. But the second most common is your email security. Somebody leaves your company and IT hasn't shut down their account quickly enough, and somebody gets access. And now they have access to your organization, and they pull down somebody's, or maybe 100 people's PII. That is the most valuable information to a hacker. That's what they want to sell. You notice what they steal when they go online? They can't steal money. They steal data. And they steal your social security number. They can sell that. That's what they're trying to steal. And your responsibility as a landlord is not just to have a legal document that says everything under the sun that you're not responsible for it. It's to actually be responsible for it and to collect it in a safe and effective manner. That's not about UX. That's not about making things better and faster. That's about making things safe. Because, like I said, the cost of a hack is now exceeding $10 million. And if you have 1,000 employees, that's a lot of risk you're carrying around. How many deals are you doing a year, right? Are you looking at 50,000 documents a year? You probably are. I do, right? Like, at scale, this becomes a massive problem. And that's really where I want landlords, on the CTO side and the cybersec side to think about is how do you protect your prospective tenants' information at scale?
Incredible. So Josh, you summed up your career journey in one word, persistence. What does that word mean to you and context to commercial real estate, prop tech, and building Otso?
So I learned this in brokerage. The best brokers, you're going to get told no a lot. You're going to get rejected a lot. It's just part of the process. And frankly, it seasons you a bit for entrepreneurship because, going to seek investment or learning how to build software, building trust with partners and hiring people. Those aren't skills you necessarily have day one when you start your company. But brokerage is really good at teaching you, hey, you might get a no, but there's always another opportunity. Building a company is very similar. The majority of things you're going to hear are no. which is, and it's not no, I hate you, or no, I don't like your product, or you stink. And again, a lot of people take that personally. It's not. It's mostly, I'm busy and I don't have time to look at this, especially in enterprise sales. And so what I mean by persistence is being a relationship based company, sending them information that isn't just sales information. It's useful, hosting webinars and panels, podcasts like this, providing knowledge transfer to their team, supporting them. Again, if you're working in a large corporate organization, we've had very successful folks that work with us get promoted. Well, how did that happen? Well, that's great content for other folks that are doing leasing admin and back office and asset management to go, all right, well, maybe I can take this path. What tools can I use to further my career? That's what persistence means. It's not taking it personally. It's continuing to build. It's reiterating. It's taking client feedback and customer feedback as gospel. There's nothing more valuable than when a client says, this stinks. Why did you do this? Okay, you're right. Why did I do that? Again, you're going to assume if you're starting a company that you're right. You're not. I wasn't. Almost no one is. Your product is going to change 500 times. That's okay. The persistence is being able to continually get back up, dust yourself off, and go, okay, customers, what do you really need? And then having the persistence and the faith and the, grit, as we like to say, from Angela Duckworth, to fight your way through and keep at it.
Amazing. I tell all my clients, you can never fail unless you give up. If you give
100%.
up, then you're done, right? But if you never give up, you can always get back up on that horse and you can continue going, right?
That's the attitude. We love it.
Percent. Excellent. So when you zoom out and you look at the next 3 to 5 years in commercial leasing operations, retail, office, industrial, what do you think changes the most?
Yeah, so I think there's a continued amplification and adoption of AI. I think with leasing operations, whether it's they're using vendors like us or they're bringing in vendors on the legal side, there's a lot of opportunity there for these institutionals to get better at it for a variety of reasons. Things that used to take a long time don't necessarily as much anymore. I think you'll see companies that used to be very resistant to building something themselves start trying it. You might have like a marketing team say, hey, we just want to build our own dashboard here. We don't want to pay for a, Mix or a HubSpot. We want to try and, bring it in ourselves. I think you'll see a lot of change in marketing automation and prospecting. I think you'll see a lot of ad-driven companies suffer. There'll be less consultants. There'll be more, hey, we think we can do this ourselves. What AI is really good at is once you train it on your knowledge base, it can become a very useful retrieval augmented generation solution at scale. I think the smart companies are building consistent feeds of information, whether it's lease abstraction, so companies like Profia, where they're pulling clauses and terms out of these leases, or companies like Proto, where they're pulling information from like PDF rent rolls, or companies like us, where they're pulling information from tenant due diligence. That information is going to be unified. And I think my dream in 5 years would be for an asset manager to sit down and go, let me look at a holistic view across my portfolio. And within those 20 buildings or 40 buildings, here's my average credit rating across those. And it matches my rent roll. And we have a renewal in 6 months, and it's with this tenant. And we just saw that their cash flow has had a positive trend for the past 8 months. Why don't we go to them now? And let's get them expanded. Let's get them renewed. Think of how powerful that is at scale.
That's amazing.
That seems impossible for most landlords. And I'm telling you, it's not. A lot of that can be done right now. And we're doing it.
Incredible. So do you think in a few years, underwriting as a service becomes the norm, or are we still really early?
I do. I think it does become the norm. I think antiquated practices are going away, not only for the compliance and cybersecurity reasons, but if you're not doing this, you're the landlord where your investors are going to ask you, why aren't you doing this? You're paying 8 people and they're slow. And I'm invested in this fund and they're paying 1 person and they're way faster than you. How? Those are the things that are going to happen across multiple teams and organizations. So I would encourage these institutions to take a very hard look at how AI can amplify their existing employee base. That doesn't mean replacing people. That means amplifying them. That means giving them access to tools that are compliant, that make sense for your workflows at scale. I think the biggest challenge for these groups are a lot of times teams are siloed, and maybe it won't be 5 years, but maybe in 10, we're hoping those silos open and data is truly unified, because that's when things get really powerful and fun. But again, I always say garbage in, garbage out. The better in that your data is, the better out your decisions will be.
Amazing, Josh. To land the plane, I want to hit the different listeners that we have. First, What's your advice to leasing or asset management teams that knows their current underwriting and screen process so slow and clunky, but they don't know where to start fixing it?
Yeah, you can reach out to us at otso.io. You can set a meeting with us. It'll take us 15 minutes. We'll explain to you how we can make your life easier. Trials are cheap. They're fast. We charge roughly $300 a report. For an assignment, you're probably charging $2,000. So you're literally making money by using us on the assignment side. The new deal that you're writing a $50,000 check for in TI, spend the $300 or $400 to figure out whether you should. That's number one. And if you're a CTO listening to this, if you're not using us, I encourage you to get a cybersecurity compliant process in place for tenant due diligence. Whether it's me or somebody else, whether you build it yourself, I don't think you can build what we do, but I encourage you to try. And I'm happy to chat with you about how we do it and why we do it and why our clients love us so much.
Amazing. And the second question, what would you say to an owner or a CIO who's trying to evaluate AI-powered tools without getting distracted by buzzwords?
Yeah, I think number one is you have to do a holistic assessment of your existing systems. If you live in the Microsoft ecosystem, then I think it's incumbent upon you to look at Copilot and things of that nature. If you don't live in the Microsoft systems, if you live in the Google ecosystem, then Gemini makes more sense for you. Again, I think your legacy systems, AI is only as good as what you give it access to. And so if you're not using those systems now, you're going to have a much harder time getting it to work at scale. I think that's just number one. Amazon's coming out with some solutions, but they don't have a ton of stuff now that I love. But your data probably lives somewhere in an AWS server anyway, or it's in an, Azure workflow or whatever it may be. But that's happening. That's there. That's viable. So I think first, like legacy systems, take a look and say, like, how long have we been here? Do we want to stay here? And if we don't, go where you want to transition your legacy systems to. There will be an AI that kind of comes with that. And again, I think the most interesting thing we're seeing at the AI level for when you put all this data together is you at the CTO level yes, it's compliant in cybersecurity, but the CIO level, imagine having a queryable system, like being able to chat with your data, if you have all of the business terms from all of your leases, if legal could chat with all the clauses and pull up the specific section 5.2 clause 1A that we negotiated with Chipotle because their lawyer changed this. That might take days right now for somebody to pull up, and it may not even be in a system. That's the thing. But again, spend the time to process these documents, to get them into a secure and compliant system, and then think about, okay, cool, how can I do what I just described? Putting AI on top of that and giving it access to that. Again, got to do it in a compliant manner, but that just becomes really, really powerful because then at scale, your legal team can search it, can query it. Your leasing team can query not only their past prospects, but, they're automatically notified because Otso told them this tenant has, an interest in expanding. That is really powerful stuff at scale. So that's what I would encourage them to look at. Have these conversations. Vendors are probably doing this already because the one benefit of having a smaller company is you have flexibility and speed. They're working, they're iterating, they're doing it in a compliant manner. Talk to these vendors. They're moving at the speed of light. And at minimum, I'd be happy to have a conversation with you and point you in the right direction. And I think most of my, prop tech folks in the space, whether it's our investors at Second Century, will get you pointed in the right direction so you can make good decisions.
That's fantastic. Josh, this has been great. You're solving real world problems in a part of the business that doesn't get talked about enough. And it's clear that this is coming from real world experience, not just theory.
These people are heroes. They do a lot of the tough work. We don't give them enough gratitude. So if you see a leasing admin today, pat them on the back. They're doing God's work.
For people who want to learn more about Otso and connect with you directly, where's the best place to find you online?
Yeah, so otso.io is our website. You can always catch me on LinkedIn. I've got a profile there. I'm happy to chat anytime. You can email me at josh@otso.io as well. I'm happy to have a conversation. Otherwise, you can catch us on the conference circuit. We're always at ICSC. We visit with our investors at things like Blueprint, and I'd love to meet you in person too.
Amazing. Perfect. So we'll drop those links in the show notes. This has been the AI Edge podcast. If you got value from this episode, share it with someone on your leasing or asset management team or ownership team who cares about better ops and better decisions. And we'll see you on the next episode.